So you get a yes, and the British one, which looks like that, but with a thing plugged into there. But the alternative, you take that out as an ordinary. Not one of those things. It's like a reading where you want to bring down.
Good morning, everyone. I guess it's time to start. This is the spring working group session in Seoul. Bruno is not here, and he's sleeping right now, so I'll be alone. The note well that you must have seen already if you attended other sessions. Please be aware of that, and please be aware of its content, and take the time to read it. A few points. I'm your new co-chair, Martin. Thanks to John, who did a lot for that group. Blue sheets are running. If there are any volunteer for Jabber or minute taking, that would be really welcome. And just to let you know also that we might have a virtual queue. I don't know, somebody is there, but it's not a crowded meeting, so we should be able to manage. So, working group progress, if I may call that progress. We don't have any new RFC since the last meeting. We've managed to close only 2 out of 7 working group last calls. Strictly speaking, these are not fully working group last calls. They also include IPR calls that were done, that have been done separately and prior to the last call. But nevertheless, it's part of the same phase. So 2 out of 7 working group last calls, and only 1 out of 3 adoptions. So, well, that's progress in a certain way, but I would really like this to change so that we have better figures next meeting. So a reminder on our objective that the working group has agreed on is to push as a whole these 4 working group documents, the architecture and 3 use cases. So as a whole and as soon as possible. But we've lost considerable amount of time since the last meeting by doing IPR polls separately to working group last calls. So we could have done them jointly, but the delay comes from the fact that after 3 months, we don't have all the answers from all the authors on the 4 documents that were polled. You might see that, so we have 2 which are in, well, we have only one which is in good shape. Strictly speaking, it's 2. The resiliency use case, we managed to get, it's in orange because the last answer came in like less than a week ago. But to address that point, we had to run after that person, and in fact, we ended up removing him from the list of authors. So be aware that something like that could happen. And for the architecture, I think we've received the last missing IPR answer 2 days ago. So it's orange, it's green, but I wanted to emphasize that the latest answers came in very recently. For the IPv6, we're still missing some answers. And we have 2 working group last call to go. The target that I'd like to set is that we press the button to send these documents to IESG before, well, in 1 month, before the Christmas period. So I will really expect everyone to work on that. For the other working group documents, so no change since Berlin for these four, and they are ready for a working group last call. And here again, I'd like to set quite an aggressive target, is to have all these sent to IESG before Chicago. But again, one of the top 3 documents that went through IPR polls is missing IPR answers. It was 3 out of 3 a few days ago. So the situation has here also improved because of a recent warning that was sent to all the authors that they could simply disappear from the draft if they failed to answer in a timely manner. Few other working group documents. 2 of them are on the agenda, so I won't speak through them. We have the OEM requirements and MPLS NECA segments, which has been recently adopted. Adoption calls, so not much difference here compared to working group last calls. The level of support and interest expressed on the list is quite questionable. So I would really like this to change. And we have also the same IPR issue. We're still missing IPR answers on large-scale interconnect. For the recursing info, Stefano will talk about it today. So we have some drafts which are candidate for working group adoption, in the sense that the authors have informed us that they would like us to do a poll for adoption. The situation we are in today leads us to prefer clearing the situation before adopting new document. It's not an absolute rule, but it's a very likely one, at least over the next 3 months, I'd say. So conclusion on that, we have a challenging roadmap ahead. 4 documents to IESG before Christmas, and 4 other one before Chicago. So I really expect the authors to be extremely reactive, both in answering the IPR polls, but also in addressing the comments that will pop up during the last calls, and the working group itself to feel concerned and review those documents to make sure that in the pace that we'll be working at is not detrimental to the quality of the document that we want to submit. This is the agenda. It has been reworked a bit, but not drastically. And an update that is not shown here is that Stefan will take half an hour to talk about Young, because he has so many things to say. 15 minutes. Les?
So is there actually an update on the segment routing architecture draft in this session?
No.
Okay. So can we get an update on what's expected in version 10?
Version 10 is under review between the authors. It integrates a couple of comments that have been made regarding the strict SPF definition and some other small editorial changes. Hopefully it will be submitted next week.
So does it include the SRLB additions that were made to the IGP drafts?
Okay, we discussed this in the OSPF and ISIS working groups. I initially said that, yeah, we probably have to change the segment routing architecture draft, but in fact, I don't think we need. The SRLB is not something essential to the architecture. It's a small IGP extension just to advertise a label range to a controller. So it doesn't impact in any way the architecture. So no need for changes in the architecture.
Thank you for that clarification.
There was no dedicated slot for that because it could have been addressed either on the list or by that simple discussion. Yes.
Okay, I'm Les Ginsberg. It's my co-authors.
Not sure it works, so I'll switch the slides.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to work. Okay, this draft has been progressing, I guess, for about a year. I'd like to think we're getting close to resolution, but there are some important issues I do want to talk about today. Just a quick summary, why are we doing this? Because you have distributed configuration of SIDs, and it's possible that there will be conflicts. And in order to avoid forwarding loops, we need to have or at least drop packets or what have you, we need to have a consistent resolution policy when conflicts are detected. There have been multiple options discussed in the draft over the past year. The latest version of the draft specifies one of the options as the one that the working group has selected, and I'm going to talk about that in more detail next. Since Berlin, we got some input from principally one service provider with some support from a second. We got an indication that one vendor has implemented ignore overlap only, which was one of the policy choices. And we've received no other input. I was kind of hoping we would get more input, but that's all that we have received. We also have added a support for an SRMS preference value. I'll talk about that some more. So based on the input that we have received, we have selected ignore overlap only as the policy of choice, and that's what's specified in the latest version of the draft. Next. So SRMS preference is a new attribute that is per node attribute that is, we've defined advertisements in both the IGP drafts, ISIS and OSPF to advertise it. It's simply an 8-bit unsigned number. 0 is reserved to say these advertisements, SRMS advertisements, are not to be used. This gives an operator a way to start configuring something and advertise it and verify it before it actually gets used. 1 through 255 is an actual preference value, higher being preferred. By default, an SRMS advertisement has a value of 128. That means if you don't advertise this, if there's no IGP advertisement, since this is a new advertisement, we obviously have implementations that don't support it, you will assign 128 to those advertisements. For the SIDs that are advertised in prefix reachability advertisements, we have not changed the format, so we haven't added any fields to actually advertise a preference value for them. They're just all assigned a value of 192. So by default, the prefix reachability advertisements are going to be preferred over SRMS advertisements. But given the values we've chosen, if somebody wants to prefer SRMS advertisements, they still have room above 192 to make that choice. Next. Okay, the representation of a generalized mapping entry was modified slightly. The first field, it used to be, is the source from a prefix reachability advertisement or an SRMS advertisement. It's been now replaced by the preference value. Other than that, this is the same that has been in earlier versions of the draft. So if you look down at the bottom, there's 2 examples. By default, if you have a preference of 192, that would be from a prefix reachability advertisement. 128 is from an SRMS advertisement. Next. A quick review of terminology. There are prefix conflicts and SID conflicts. The prefix conflicts refers to, in both cases, we're referring to the object that has a conflict. So in a prefix conflict, you have two different SIDs assigned to the same prefix. In a SID conflict, you have the same SID assigned to two different prefixes. Next. How do we achieve consistency? Clearly, everybody has to have the same database, or it's just impossible to guarantee that you will come to the same conclusion. Just because you've configured something locally doesn't mean that you include it in your conflict resolution. It has to be advertised so that everybody in the network sees this value as well. And the preference for the advertisement is based on the advertisement itself, not where it came from. We don't take into account the source ID at all. And whether the advertisement is local to the box or advertised remotely also doesn't matter. Next. So we have two sources, one from the prefix reachability advertisement, one from SRMS advertisement. And again, in both cases, you only use things if they're actually out for advertised, not just because they were locally configured. In the case of remote advertisements, it's what is reachable that you can use. If you can't reach it, it's potentially a stale advertisement. Next. So these were the three policies that we've discussed over the past few meetings. Based on the limited input that we've received, we've selected ignore overlap only. Next. This is the preference rule. The preference rule has not changed since previous versions, other than previously we had specified prefer prefix reachability over SRMS advertisements. At one point we were experimenting with the other way around. Now we have the preference, so we just substituted the preference value as the first tiebreaker. Next. This is a working example. I presented this the last time. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I left it in the slides so that folks who had not seen it before could go through it. So if we could go next, and one more. Okay, this is just a summary of the example test results. And based on that particular example, you can see that ignore overlap only resulted in the greatest number of prefixes that still had a SID associated with them based upon the preference policy. We don't know whether we've selected the correct one, of course, but we have selected something. Next slide. So this is what I really want to spend a little bit of time on here. Again, based on the input we've received so far, ignore overlap only is what we've chosen. If we don't get further input, that's the way the draft is going to proceed. I just want to emphasize some points about the complexity that this introduces in your implementation and in achieving interoperability. Interoperability means you've got multiple implementations in your network. If they don't come up with the same answer based on the same database, either because of a bug or because of a misinterpretation of the specification, then we're not going to achieve our goal of getting a consistent resolution network-wide. So here's a couple of examples. When I say order matters, so remember there's two types of conflicts. There are prefix conflicts where you have different SIDs assigned to the same prefix, and these conflicts are constrained to a single topology and a single algorithm. There are SID conflicts where you have the same SID is assigned to different prefixes, and what this is illustrating is it makes a difference whether, when you apply the preference rule, whether you do prefix conflict resolution first, followed by SID conflict resolution, or vice versa. And basically what happens here in the first example, we take the first entry and we're looking at prefix conflicts first. So we have two entries for 192.021. We compare them, we pick the first one because it has a lower SID. And then we compare, so we've now gotten rid of the second entry. We now compare the first entry to the third entry, and there's no conflict there, and we end up with two entries in the active policy. If, however, we were to take the same database and process the SID conflicts first, then we'd start with the two entries that have SID 200, and we'd pick the first entry because it has a lower prefix, and then we'd compare it to the third entry, and now we've got two entries with the same prefix, so we have to choose between them, and we end up choosing the one with the lower SID. So in the second case, we end up with only one prefix that's in our active policy. So somebody could say, I have followed the preference rules defined in the draft, but if they don't do things in the same order, they're going to come up with a different answer. Next slide. Here's another example, and this is peculiar to the ignore overlap only policy. So remember, in ignore overlap only, if I have an SRMS entry that, say, covers, that has a range greater than 1, I'm going to operationally, and I'm not talking here about how the code might be implemented, but I'm going to only exclude the individual entries within that range of 1,000 that actually have a conflict and end up on the losing end. So we have the concept of the underived entry, the original mapping entry that was advertised by a node, and then we have the derived entries, which is essentially those portions of the range that was originally advertised that turn out not to be in conflict. And so this is an example where, depending upon whether you make your comparison against the underived entries or the derived entries, you end up with a different answer. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all the steps here. I'm happy to answer any questions on it on the list or offline. But what you can see here is that you end up with different results depending upon how you do it. And the point I'm trying to emphasize here is ignore overlap only introduces implementation complexity, and two vendors can say, I have implemented the draft and have good reason to believe that they followed things, but they did things slightly differently, and they end up with different answers. And so we have not achieved the goal, which is to get consistent conflict resolution policy throughout the network. And I'm trying to emphasize this point, and it's really been a point of discussion, I think, for the past year in the context of this draft, is there are sort of competing goals here. One of them has been the express goal, let's try and maximize traffic delivery. In our conflict resolution, let's try to make sure that we have a SID for as many prefixes as we possibly can. And the other goal is to try to keep the conflict resolution policy simple so that it's easy for everybody's implementation to come up with the same answer. If we put too much complexity in here, and we also have to remember that whatever answer you come up with, you're not guaranteed that it's the intended answer based on what the intention was when you deployed your network. We're just making an arbitrary choice based on an arbitrary preference rule. So we may not actually choose the prefix that maximizes your traffic delivery. Do we want to invest a lot of time in implementation complexity and comparing implementations to see if they actually come up with the same answer under the same conditions? This to me is a significant risk with ignore overlap only. And I'm not standing up here and trying to say, absolutely we don't do it. The feedback we have gotten thus far has been, we prefer ignore overlap only, but we need to make a conscious decision that we're buying into a lot of complexity. We're potentially going to spend time in investigating interoperability issues, and the end result is not going to guarantee that we're actually going to be delivering the traffic that we really want to deliver. Next slide. So this is just a summary as a result of the examples that your implementation has to do things in a certain order. You have to do prefix conflicts before SID conflicts, and you have to look at the entries based on the order in which the attributes are specified in the preference rule. Next slide. Okay, these are some, I guess, the sort of the output of what might be next for the draft. If the working group is essentially happy with the choice that has been made, I think what we need to do is add some text in the draft that clarifies these ordering issues related to the ignore overlap only policy. So it's at least clearer for people who implement this that this is critical to the validity of their implementation. And we need to clearly state that there is some text in the draft now, but I think it needs to be embellished to indicate that just following the preference rule doesn't guarantee interoperability. You also have to follow the order. And I put a little side comment here, which is the complexity is associated with the ignore overlap policy, ignore overlap only. If we were to choose the simplest policy, which is you've got things that conflict, you don't know which one is correct, ignore them both, we would not have this complexity. Next. Or is that the last one? No. So, okay, I think this is the last. I would really want to get more feedback, if we can, that this is the direction that the working group wants to go. If there are people out there who have been silent up to now, this is really the opportunity to speak up, because if you don't, I think that, we're done. The draft will get polished up and will progress and become an RFC. So if the feedback is yes, let's go with what we have, that's what we're going to do. If we do get other feedback, then we could potentially revise this and go to a simpler policy. Questions, comments?
Hi, this is Uma Chanduri. So last revision I didn't read it actually. So, but I have been following and I have a lot of comments in the mailing list, earlier versions. So after looking into more this, keep it simple is extremely important. But you already progressed so far that you want to make it complex. But okay, the point what I meant to say is one question. First question is, you said that even you follow the preferences and order, you still see interoperability issues? That's what you said? No.
I'm saying if an implementation could use the same preference rule, but process entries in a different order and get a different answer. And the examples that are in the slides illustrate that.
But you are mentioning that you are asking to follow the particular order now, right?
Correct.
But you cannot guarantee that how you receive the LSPs, right?
So if you're talking about transient issues that occur when you're converting, this is another type of convergence, sure, at a given instant in time, but this is, you may have inconsistencies, but this is no different than what happens when you converge with prefix reachability, for example.
Okay. But still, after looking into more in this, I will give more comments on the list, but keep it simple is better actually. It's not only implementation, it's about debugging too once it's deployed.
So I agree. Are you then advocating for the ignore policy? Sorry to put you on the spot, but
so ignore is better actually. So just drop it. If it is conflict resolution, operator will have to take care. What is they have to come back and to see that what is the misconfigured actually.
Okay, thank you.
Shraddha, Juniper Networks. I have a comment on the preference rules. In network consolidation cases, like if multiple protocols are running, then we should have a protocol preference also in the preference set of preference rules. And I think it should be on the top, because generally we apply the protocol preference. I mean, if there is, when network operators look at the network, they think of protocol preference as as getting the highest preference.
So this is actually explicitly stated in the draft. Your forwarding plane is protocol agnostic. It does not care whether the route was put in by OSPF or ISIS. So The
Yes,
source,
that's right.
whether it's a protocol difference, whether it's a router ID difference, is deliberately not taken into account in the preference rule.
But if you look at network consolidation cases, right, the way it works today, if there is conflicting entries between OSPF and ISIS, then it is the protocol preference that plays the role, right? I mean, that should apply to segment routing as well.
So if you look, I know you have to go back quite a number of slides, but there's a point being made that what you use in your database, that you then look at conflicts, is based upon what you actually use in the forwarding plane. So, for example, if you have two different routes from OSPF and ISIS, there's a winner based upon what's actually installed in the forwarding plane. That's what's going to be used in your conflict resolution.
We can discuss this a bit more on the list, I guess. We can discuss more on the list, I guess,
okay.
Because I feel protocol preference should be one of the rules.
Okay, fair enough, but I just want you to realize we quite intentionally did not include that.
So my, without much analysis, my feeling is that, if you have a conflict, something's broken, and whatever allows operations to find it and fix it the fastest is goodness. And it seems like the simple ignore achieves that much more than this. Okay. Somebody might look at the prefixes that they end up with and be scratching their head for some time before they figure out what combination of things caused it.
Robin from Huawei. I have some comments on this draft. Okay, the first one, I think I agree this is a problem, but I think in fact the problem should not be exist if we use global label. Yes, and also I know the major vendors, they not until today, I think a lot of vendors, they only directly use the label instead of sRGB. Okay, this is a fact. Okay, in essence, this problem can be very simple. The second one, even you can use the sRGB or convert this global segment ID to the local label. Okay, no problem. You want to make it complex. Okay, but I think from the point of engineering view, we can also make it simple. It's just the configuration issue. Need not take so much time to talk about this problem. That's my comment.
Okay, so let me see if I can respond to both. The problem that arises here has nothing to do. We are in fact using the sRGB, but if you have a configuration on one node that assigns index 1000 for 1.1.1.1, and on another node it assigns index 2000 for 1.1.1.1, you have a conflict. That's the problem we're trying to solve.
Hi, Jessia from Huawei. I have some questions about this draft because in this draft we have listed some scenarios for the conflict, but I think perhaps there is a lot of there is some other scenarios of conflict, like if we have if the same prefix has the different SID, how to solve this?
So both prefix conflicts
because like the
and SID conflicts are covered
like
in the draft.
Anycast segment, they have the same prefix, but if the different routers configure the different SIDs,
that is part of what we've covered.
Is the conflict.
Yeah, sorry, that's part of what is covered in the draft.
Okay, and another scenarios about is because we define the in the in the domain, we have the SID is global, but if different domain, like a different area or different process, how to consider this scenario? Because sometimes we have to import the prefix from one area to another area, right? This is another scenario, and another scenario is the different IGP protocol. If you have the ISS protocol and OSPF protocol, if they define the same SID for prefix or for different prefix, how to resolve this problem or resolve this conflict? So maybe we can give some clarification for such scenarios.
So to answer your last point, the scenario is already covered in the draft.
Okay.
As far as your previous point, what we're dealing with here is the forwarding plane for a particular domain. Because if we get to the edge of the domain, then we're going to potentially use a completely different SID and different label to go into the other domain. That's a different database. We're not trying to resolve conflicts between domains.
Okay.
I'm taking, it stops after Wim, and I'm taking questions if they are quick.
Yeah, I will very quick. I just comment. Okay, I think maybe I tell you that other working group is doing the BGP link state and also the PCE link state. Shada has proposed the policy issue about this overlap between the SS and OSPF, and also we maybe have the overlap issue between the OSPF, SS, BGP link state, PCE link state. You will get more and more time to solve this issue. Okay, so introduce more and more complex policy. Okay, more and more complex protocol extension. That's not what we want. Okay, that's my comment.
Wim before.
You had Stefano.
Be quick. Stefano, you're taking on your speaking time.
Wim Hendricks, Nokia. I think what is important here, I think we have to decide between, as Les stated before, between minimizing the impact when you have conflict versus the complexity of implementation. And I think what I would advocate is to operators who want to deploy this technology, what they really would like to get and achieve in this situation. Of course, we would like to avoid this conflict by all means, but there is manual things which will result into this situation. And I think what is important, and I would like to stress, is to get operators' input to this question, because I think vendors, we all prefer to keep it simple, although we implemented the more complex schema at the moment. I think it's important to understand what is the operator's input on this, because that will probably determine where we have to go, right?
Yeah, exactly. I just want to emphasize what Wim said. So I'm happy to see that finally people realize that simplicity is a good thing. Unfortunately, so far, everybody has been very silent at the mic and in the mailing list. So it's good to converge towards a request for simplicity. It would even better if more operators can speak up and tell us what they want, and so we can close this in the best way. But so far, we didn't have much voices speaking up on that sense. So it's nice to come now and say, oh, this is too complex, let's simplify it. Yeah, okay, it's good to know it now, but please now speak it once for all, and let's close the issue.
Robin, are you an operator?
One sentence.
No.
Okay.
Same question to...
Yes, John Mitchell from Google. I'm not really interested in the solution to this problem, to be honest with you. I would rather take the simple approach. We manage a number of number spaces across various routers in our domain, and I think we'll take the risk that there is an issue if you do misconfigure a router that we can then correct very quickly.
Stefan from Orange. The issue is that errors can happen, and we cannot really prevent it, so we really want to be able to maximize the traffic that we save.
No, Jeff.
Very short comment.
You have 5 seconds.
So 5 seconds. There are huge deployments of segment routing of today. Go talk to them personally.
Thanks. Thank you, Les, and thank you for your discussion points. Stefan, you're up. No. So you tell me when to switch slides.
Okay, so this presentation is about an update for the segment routing Yang model draft. So next slide, please. So it's been a very long time since we presented the latest update. So just a goal, but it's very straightforward. So this is a configuration and operation model for segment routing. So just the base of segment routing, all the IGP extensions, so activating segment routing for ISIS and OSPF, it's in a separated document that are in a dedicated working group. Next slide. So about the change, so it was a very old discussion about having per protocol sRGB. So there was an agreement to support this. So we added a feature for this support. So it's purely optional. If someone does not want to support it, it's up to the implementation. But at least the model is exposing this capability. Next slide. We added also a couple of notifications, but I think we are not done on this point. Especially we need to align with the conflict resolution draft. About the first one that we added, which is a sRGB collision, we are wondering if it's really necessary or not to have it. Normally it cannot happen because the sender is not allowed to propagate multiple overlapping sRGB, but at the same time, the conflict resolution draft, if I remember correctly, says that the receiver must check that it does not happen. So if this check is really necessary, I think it would be interesting to have a notification, but we can discuss on this. We added also the support for different algorithms for the prefixed. So especially we added the strict SPF that is still under discussion, but at least it is there from a configuration point of view. We also added the support of MSD, so we have also a feature for this, so it's optional, and we have both configuration of the MSD and also operational state. So there, I had some discussion this week with Jeff, who raised this MSD stuff. So today it seems that there is some maybe hardware issues that are not able to expose directly via MSD to the control plane. So it may be interesting to have a kind of configuration if we cannot directly retrieve the information from the hardware. So the big change that has been done really recently is a split of the segment routing Yang model into two parts. So we created a common segment routing model, which mainly includes some grouping. So why it has been done? We were requested by some people from I2RS or Ts that are working on topology modeling to be able to reuse some of our groupings. And at the same time, they did not want to import the whole segment routing model because it's not necessary. It's not necessary for them. They only want some really piece of, I would say, encoding on some stuff. So we separated the groupings in two parts. We have some common groupings that are reused by the topology model, I2RS and Ts, and we have the real segment routing groupings that are reused by the IGP models. So in terms of next step, so regarding the operational states discussion, normally we are aligned with the current policy and the consensus within IETF. So we have two different trees. We have still some work to align with all the latest draft, especially including the SRLB. The SRMS preference is not there yet. Maybe adding also a new notification for the prefix conflict. So we have some alignment to do, but it's in good condition to maybe close it soon. But I don't know if we will need to wait to maybe close the conflict draft and so on before going to last call this document. So we are welcoming comments, reviews, critiques, or whatever. So feel free to raise your point.
Okay, Robin from Huawei. Because Stephanie, you are from the...
Stefan, not Stephanie. Stephanie is a woman name.
Stefano. Stephanie.
Thank you.
You're confused. Okay, so I think that you're from this operator. I think you have this enough experience in the maintenance and the management of the network. Okay, I want to do this one. Now, I think the most important challenge for the operator is most important is fast service provisioning to get more revenue. Is that right?
Yes, it's right.
Yeah.
We
Okay,
need to
I agree.
automate
You agree?
provisioning.
Okay, so I think, do you agree the previous slides about the overlap policy? You think is a useful work or not useful? I think that okay. Just now, I not listen to your opinion carefully. You tell me that about the previous slides. About
We wanted to maximize the traffic for the overlap policy.
Okay, I just tell you, if the overlap, I mean the sRGB overlap policy, if we needed, so I will that the young model of this work. Tell me.
What I told about the sRGB conflict is that normally it should not happen because the sender is not allowed to do this. But in case of a very bad implementation which is not compliant, the conflict draft says also that the receiver must do a check.
Okay.
Robin, if you intend to restart the whole discussion on...
It seems.
Okay,
we're discussing Hang here.
Okay, I just discuss Young. I tell you what will happen for the Young model. Because for the past 3 years, I proposed other ideas about the segment routing, bandwidth guaranteed segment, tunnel segment, multi-topology segment, because this may be the new features.
Yes, but what we are including here in the Yang model is that what is the consensus now on segment routing? We cannot really put all the IDs and so on. So we need to put the base, which is stable now, and then close it. And you may be able to augment it in future if needed.
Okay.
But we can
I second that.
forever.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I hope that your model can be quickly fulfilled and to satisfy your the requirement for faster service provisioning of segment routing.
Right.
Okay. Good luck.
Thank you.
Any more question? Thank you.
Am I the next speaker also?
Right.
Okay. So a new topic, but not really completely new. So this draft is about how can we create a non-protected path using segment routing. Next slide, please. So this is a really strong requirement from our customers. It's not a new requirement. Even with RSVP today, we are able to create paths that are not subject to fast reroute because, for example, the customer wants to have two separated paths, two diverse paths, and wants to manage the protection by itself, maybe because it does not trust ours or whatever, but it's its choice, so we have to fulfill it. And today the issue we have with segment routing is that there's multiple solutions to do this. And we As an operator, we want to have a single recommended way to provide this kind of service, because let's say that you have, for example, 5 options to fulfill these requirements. If you have 5 vendors and each vendor is taking into its implementation a different approach, and when you have a multi-vendor network, you will not be able to build an end-to-end service, because all these options may be optional in terms of implementation. And I never seen a vendor implementing all the possible options. So we need to have a kind of recommended solution that everyone need to support. And then it would be up to implementation to add other options as well, but at least this one may be mandatory. So first, what's the goal of the draft? So we need to present the various options. So for the moment, it's really open. We don't have any recommended solution. And please don't blame me about the content of the draft. I wrote it, to be honest, I wrote it a couple of minutes before going to vacation. So the analysis is not really complete. It's really far from this, but I wanted absolutely to start this discussion within this IETF. That's why I wrote this draft. We need to remember that with Spring, we have some constraints. Today, maybe these constraints will disappear in a couple of years, but we still have the issue with MSD, so capability of a particular node to push a number of labels. And we have also some load balancing issue. Is the router capable to inspect, for example, the IP payload or hashing of a stack with 10, 20, 25 labels? Is it really realistic or not? So these constraints, we need to take them into account when we will decide the recommended solution. So we are trying to highlight the pros and cons. I'm not sure it's really good today, but we need to progress on this. It's really just a first overview. The goal is really to provide as an outcome a recommended solution. Next slide. So we have multiple options today. The first one, the easiest one, I would say, we can use only adjacency seeds, because the adjacency seed has a semantics that allows to have a non-protected adjacency seed. So we have this B flag when we are able to have multiple adjacency seed in particular link. So we can do it, but I think everybody can see that there are some challenges, because if I have 20 up to cross, I will need maybe 19 labels just for the transport, and then I will need to add entropy and also service label. So it does not seem to be realistic, honestly. So we can try to compress the stack by using a combination of nodal segment and adjacency segment. But here we have also multiple sub-options. First one, we need a node seed that is not protected. So why not relying on this new strict SPF node seed? So there was some discussion on this, on the definition of the strict SPF node seed. So if I'm using the strict SPF node seed, does it prevent it to be fast rerouted? So it's an open question, and I think we need a clarification on this, because normally strict SPF it's following the SPF and it cannot go away of this. So is it fast reroute included in this or not? That's a question. We can think about adding a flag in the prefix seed, so in the node seed, to say it should be protected or not, like we have in the adjacency seed. That's an option. I'm not telling that it's good or not, but that's an option. And another option with node seed is that we can create as an operator 2 node seeds, and we manage by local policies the activation of fast reroute for a particular node seed or not. But we will need different prefixes, so it may increase our IGP table and so on. So there is some impact as well. Oui, there was the last option, Martin. No, no worry. So last option is to use a combination of adjacency seed and binding seed, and we may be able to use binding seed to represent a list of adjacency seed. So Let's say that I have a controller, some very smart controller. It may be able to place some transit tunnels within the network, associating a binding seed with this, and then I will be able for my end-to-end LSP to reuse this binding seed. That's an option as well. Can I take the question after the presentation? Sure. It's almost finished. So the next step. So clearly we need to go ahead with the analysis. Don't really take care about what is written today in the draft. So we need to progress on this. We really need feedback from the working group on the pros and cons, and also, is there some other options that we missed? Maybe. The really important point is that as an operator, we have some deployment requirements. So we need to have running code as soon as possible. So we need to come with this recommended solution in a really fast manner. So we would like to request working group adoption for this document, even if it's not complete, but we really think that this is the work that we need to do, and we need to come to a solution, whatever it is. So let's progress on this as soon as possible. Thank you.
Sorry. Just answer. So 2 questions. One, here you're talking about destination-based forwarding. And segment routing topology is typically underlay. So at some point you'll have...
What do you mean by destination-based forwarding? So from a service point of view or for transport?
From transport point of view. So you'll have VPN or any other service on top, which will use same label and same IP address in the transport network. So at some point you'll have 2 customers. One asking for protected path, while another one asking for not protected path.
That's true. That's true. This is a requirement. If I want to establish a transport path from P1 to P2, one customer may want a protected path, one may want a non-protected path, and one may want a constrained non-protected path or constrained protected path.
So overloading semantics of seed might not just work for you. You need more than that. It's
three SIDs.
Yeah,
three SIDs, each with different attributes. No problem.
There's always no problem if you're involved. Number 2, it's not really different than optical restoration with MPLS fast route on top and BGP on top, right? So maybe we just need to create. I mean, if your customer wants to use their own ingress protection, so be it, you just need to make sure that it kicks in before you try to re-optimize your transport or whatever it is.
Yes, but we don't really know what are the timers that are used by all customers. So
my point, the problem space is wider, and we need seriously consider it's a valid problem and worth working on. Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Right. Chris.
Chris Bowers. So, could you go back to the slide on the potential solutions you're looking at with, well, even one back, I think. No, okay, forward, sorry. You mentioned not knowing the timers that the customers require. I mean, like with the node SID solution, it seems to me like eventually it's going to converge with the IGP again.
That's true.
Now, that could occur in a second, so is that a problem? I mean, what are the requirements on not protection? Is it not protection forever, or not protection for 5 seconds or 10 seconds? What's the goal here?
In terms of requirements, it's a question of fast reroute is not acceptable, but I think regular convergence maybe, because there will be a kind of fast reroute-like mechanism at the customer side. So if the IGP converge, I think it's fine, because we need absolutely to re-establish the path. So the automatic reconversion, so the path is needed.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Sindom, I think I haven't read the draft or thought much about it, so I won't. I may have already disclosed that I have an idea which of the solutions I prefer, but I think it's good.
You can tell it.
I think number 2 is the best right now.
Which flavor of number 2?
Adding the protection flag to a SID and having multiple SIDs, but I got to think about it more. I can see Les shaking his head. So
yeah, because I think there was already some discussion on the list about this.
Okay. But I think it's work we should adopt.
Thank you.
So if you use semantic of strict SPF, meaning there's going to be IGP convergence and potentially you'll get onto the shortest path again, right?
Right.
So in TILFA, you could pre-calculate post-convergence topology and have your backup following your post-convergence. So there's no real difference. You just do it faster.
That's true. That's true.
So, I mean, de facto, there's no difference if you use it.
There is, because you have to take the path from an end-to-end point of view. So even if transiently the strict SPF node seed is rerouted on the same path that TILFA may take, the controller or the head end, if the head end is responsible for the end-to-end path computation, may reroute and may not use anymore this node seed because the constraint path has changed.
Stefan, the real requirement is not very clear to me. An end customer, he need not be bothered about it's a protected path or non-protected path, right? He really bothers whether it's his bandwidth requirements are met, or the requirement has to be something of that sort, and not really, I don't want a
it's like transmission-like services. Today, for example, as an operator, when we are ordering some WDM links, we can ask for protected links or non-protected links because we are doing the backup on our side because we are ordering another link which is using a completely another path. So this is really similar. So sometimes we are selling, for example, Ethernet links over our MPLS networks that we resell to other operators.
So because if you use node SID, it can change at any time, right? So you don't have the guarantee that, it's the same path that's going to be used all the time. So if that's the case,
that's one of the drawbacks of the node SID that we need to take care of.
Yeah.
Robin, I have Huawei. I have several comments. The first is that can you clarify the application scenario of this draft? The first I gave you the first is coexist of the SRT and SRB. This one scenario. Second is
SRT and what?
Second, routing traffic engineering.
Yes, and the other one?
I mean the scenario.
Okay.
Yeah, scenario. I give you 3 options. You tell me which one is you get this issue and you want to solve this issue. Okay, in this application scenario, the first one is coexistence. The IP network coexistence of the SRT and the SRB. Okay, this is one scenario. Second
SRB?
Best effort.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
SR.
Okay. Our word may be different from your word. Okay, the second one is that the coexist of LDP and SRBE. SR best effort. Okay, LDP also LDP also exists in this network, IP network. Second, the third one, totally new network for SR. So 3 scenario. What scenario you get this issue and propose the solution?
It's for SRT. It's for SRT path.
Okay, SRT path.
It's for SRT path. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so the second one is that my comments is that if you do this requirement, okay, I tell you another thing. The comments is like this one. If you want to make this work in your make this in your network, I say that the status you want to be is a standard instead of information or experimental or the best practice. You want this to be a standard?
Standard, yes.
Why? Can you tell me this one? I think
because I want this particular option to be implemented by all vendors.
Okay.
So this needs to be a standard.
Okay. Do we need
ensure interoperability?
Okay. Do we need some
or deployability?
Okay. Do we need some of the protocol extensions for this one or not?
It will depend on the solutions that we will take. For example, if we go to the additional flag within the node seed, we will need to update the IGP extension. So it will depend on the scenarios that we will take.
Okay.
Today, I don't know if we will need to change something or not.
Okay, if this one, I think I think you until now you think a protocol extension maybe not necessary, right?
I'm not thinking about anything today. I'm just exposing various options. Maybe there are additional, so let's analyze and then we will come with a solution.
Okay, so
but we are not at a stage of solution now.
Okay, I will go through the options for your draft
okay.
and talk with you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other question?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Stefano Providi, Cisco. So this draft came up after, I would say, a description of a use case of a requirement has been expressed in the mailing list. And the requirements was, next slide, the ability to deploy on a single router multiple addresses of the router associated with different services, but all those addresses would use the same SID. Now, the segment routing architecture is pretty clear, one prefix, one SID, and we don't want to change the architecture also because we think there is obviously an architecture compliant solution to this. And this is where the solution is documented in this draft. Now, we send this draft, we submit it, we send it to the mailing list, and surprisingly, the individual that expressed the requirement and the use case never came back. So I don't know. So next slide. The solution is very simple. Instead of advertising the prefix with a SID, you advertise the prefix with a new piece of information into which you encode what is the SID and the prefix owning that SID you want to recurse. So it's pretty simple. We defined a new sub-TLV in both protocols, so SPF and ASIS. We call this the segment routing recursive information. Next slide. And we encode the global SID that this prefix should use. And this global SID, in fact, belongs to another prefix. That's why you need a different encoding for expressing that. Of course, you have the usual flags and algorithm, and optionally, you can also add the local SID. Let's have a look at the picture. Next slide. So this is what we want to encode in routing protocols, but let's skip this one for now. Let's focus on the functionality. So on the right side, you have a router A, which has a prefix, a loopback address, 2/32, with the node SID, 18,002. And then you may have multiple other prefixes representing different services. And the requirements that has been expressed at the beginning was, I want those services to be reachable through the same SID, so that I have to allocate just one single SID for all those prefixes, because apparently there are platforms that still have problems in allocating a certain range of labels. Now, what we do here is that instead of advertising all those individual service prefixes with all the same SID, which is not compliant to the segment routing architecture, we advertise them, and you see this in the square in the middle of the slide, using a new TLV on IGP protocols, where you express the IP address where the global SID is for that prefix, and optionally, you can have also a local SID. So some of them are with a local SID and one is without. So reading the ISIS LSP illustrated there, you can see that prefix 20010 has the new sub-TLV SRI with includes the IP address 2.2.2.2, which is the loopback address of the router with its own node SID. So on the left side, you have the FIB. Sorry, it's not router A, of course, it's another router. And for the prefixes that have been advertised with the segment routing recursive info sub-TLV, you see there what is the label that corresponds to that service based on the encoding received in the routing protocol. So the requirement is addressed. You have multiple services that, in fact, may use the same SID. Still, you are compliant because a prefix has a SID, and a SID belongs only to one prefix. And so you can multiplex by doing this kind of recursion, in fact. Next slide. So this is just the text that illustrates, that explains the picture. So next slide. The benefits, as I said, it addresses the requirements of limiting the number of labels you want to allocate in a box. And you covers all the scenarios that you have in an IGP, multi-area, and single home, multi-home prefixes, and so on. So we submitted this draft here in spring. We are going to have, obviously, the equivalent drafts in routing protocol groups, so SPF and ISIS especially. That's pretty much it. Questions?
Robbie from Huawei can go to the second slide. Second, okay. Next.
Yeah, this
no,
one.
No, this one, solution.
The problem, so the previous one? Yeah.
Okay. Okay, this increase in number of required global SIDs. Yes, Stefano. Yes. Okay, I read one thing I read. One major advantage of segment routing is that the states are only maintained at the head and end, and no state is necessary to be maintained at the midpoints and tail ends.
Correct.
But as the development of segment routing, there will be more segments which will be used on multiple purposes, such as any class segment, service chain, extra, other than limited node segment and agency segment. This may be more state. There may be more states in the segment routing-based network, and the flooding feature of IGP will make all nodes in the network have to maintain these states, which may be unnecessary to some nodes.
Robin.
Okay, I just tell you, this is my draft. Okay, this draft is proposed 2 years ago. Okay, so that today we propose this one here. Okay, so I want to ask the question is that, Stefano, you did not read my draft, or you already know the things will happen, but now that you are going to solve the issue?
I did not read your draft.
Okay.
So send me your draft. If you think you already described that idea, I'm fine with that.
Okay, yeah, I say another fact. Before I propose the draft, I quarrel with Clarence in the mailing list. I propose this issue, this one, and Yakov is also here to support this one. You are not here or not?
Sorry, what is the question?
A question means when Yakov supported me to clarify this issue to you and Clarence in the mailing list, are you here to read the mailing list or not?
I didn't recall you to explain this in the mailing list, so
okay, later I
resurrect the thread and resurrect your draft, and we will see.
No, draft. Mailing list.
If the draft that you propose matches exactly what is described here, fine. So it means that we are in agreement, and then we merge the two drafts and we move on.
Okay, I hope you. Okay, so that if this happens, I hope the description in the segment routing problem statement and the use case, please remove some text. That's my comment. Okay.
Hi, Dave Allen Erickson. I will apologize in advance for not having read the draft. Just one minor clarification, and that is I presume PHP, for example, could not be used such that the local label would inherit context from
the global
SID.
You could still use PHP. That's fine, especially if you advertise also a local label. So the packet will be received with the local label. So it's.
But how would you disambiguate the local label space from the global label space without some context?
If you do PHP, when the packet comes to you, you are the router who allocated that local label, so you know that the local label, what is the meaning and the semantic of that local label.
But if you've also received the same label value as a global label?
No, but if you do PHP and you receive that label, you know that that label is on the local range label. And so you have allocated it, so you know what is the function associated to it.
Okay, I'll take that away and
it's
think
not
about
different than receiving any other sort of label stack with on top of the stack a global label which is popped and then a local label underneath. This is no different.
Okay.
Okay, Robin from Huawei. Okay, I think if you like, I hope because the memory may be passed away with the years, I hope you read the mailing list of a Spring Working Group carefully. Okay, maybe remind your memory, or else I can get this point and post to you again.
I
the mailing
think
list.
you should post or send to me your ideas and not assume that I'm going to dig into the archives of 2 or 3 years of emails. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Can I have one more question? Yeah. Dmitry Afanasyev, Yandex. Actually, I see useful cases for that, but I have an impression that more or less the same can be achieved with just, for example, SIS distributing seeds and something like labeled BGP sessions, for example, between local node and target node and using recursive info. And so probably it would be useful to have some additional discussion in the draft when to choose what case.
I absolutely agree. The fact is that the whole discussion and the proposal on this draft came after a request in the IGP. So that's why we have the proposal here. But I fully agree with you. There are plenty of other ways to solve this because at the end of the day, what you need, it's a label stack with the global on top. And
pro and contra for each case. So probably some discussion is useful. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks.
We're done. Thank you very much. Just as a few words of conclusion, please be responsive for the next 3 months on the list. Review documents, reply to IPR polls, feel concerned. This is a necessity for that group to progress. So I really count on you. And otherwise, I'll get beaten. Thank you very much. I agree with you, and I did. I badly counted the time. That's a pure mistake from me. But you're right. Yeah, but I'm fine with doing that comment openly.
How much it can read is already there in the just no, but no. You still need some more because if a node who is not capable of removing ELI, EN can still advertise how much it can read.
So, right.
Because that's needed.
If you look at
Yes.
If you look at the entropy label RFC, it clearly defines if you advertise capability of being able to use it, you must be able to remove it.
Yes.